Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines with Tax Attorney David Gunn. David's going to talk to us about, frankly, all the kind of various taxes that we pay on income, property, sales, etc. He's also going to talk to us about the IRS and what the IRS is looking for in tax returns these days and how the audits by the IRS are going up. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Tax Attorney David Gunn.
Cox Communications is homegrown with local programming for you. Whether it's local sports, local arts and education, local news and weather, local faith and worship, or local stations with the best in entertainment, Cox Communications brings it all home to you. It's homegrown programming with roots, only on cable, only on Cox.
Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm pleased to have on the show today David Gunn. David is a board-certified tax attorney here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. David, thanks for being on the show.
Good to see you, Locke.
Tell the folks, really, you're board-certified in a number of disciplines. Tell the folks about that.
I am. I'm a board-certified tax attorney, also estate planning specialist. Practiced for a number of years as a certified public accountant many years ago. Did a stint at LSU teaching a business law class, and now practice in Baton Rouge.
A lot of water under the bridge.
That's correct.
Well, let's talk to folks today about basically income, estate planning, and taxes, because taxes is looking at getting a piece of each one of those areas.
Right.
Explain to folks how taxes are taken from income, the different kinds of income, the different kind of taxes.
Well, of course, Locke, the tax that everybody knows the most about, and we have a lot of different types of tax, is the income tax. Basically, the Internal Revenue Code and the law says that you have to pay tax on all of your income.
So any income that you earn is taxed?
That's correct, unless it's specifically excluded by the law. And there's a few exclusions, for instance, life insurance proceeds and gifts and things like that you would receive. But generally, most everything that you receive is taxable, including payments that you receive in cash.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And not only are you taxed on the income you earn at the federal level, but you are also taxed on the income you earn at the state level.
That's correct. Right now, the situation with the federal tax is it runs, of course, from a 0% tax up to 35%. Your maximum rate on the federal return is 35%, and the Louisiana return runs up to 6%. So if somebody that has quite a bit of income will in effect pay about a 40% tax rate. And
explain to the folks, we have what's called marginal tax rates.
Right.
Explain to the folks what that means.
Well, a marginal tax rate, Locke, is the upper tax rates. I mean, we live in a graduated system. Somebody that maybe works part-time or a student or something like that may not pay any tax on their income. It's below the standard deduction and the dependency exemption.
And currently that level is what? You pay no taxes?
Starts at 0 and probably up to about, for a married couple, probably 10 to 12,000 would be exempt. Single would be a little less than that because you only have one exemption. And then you run through brackets of 10%, 15%, 25% on up to 35%.
So when you hit certain levels of income, the income tax that you're going to pay on that income goes up.
That's correct. The rate goes up.
And then the same thing for the state level.
Exactly. That's right. The state level, again, begins at 0, in effect, runs through rates of 2% up to 6% in Louisiana tax.
Now, in addition to the income taxes, we also pay at the state level property taxes.
Correct.
Explain that.
Well, property taxes, it's like an ad valorem tax, and it's imposed on the valuation of your real estate, or if you're in business, what's called your personal property, like your desk or equipment in a plant or something like that. As you know, there's a whole bunch of other taxes like sales and use and rental tax. raises quite a bit of money for the state and the local government.
And I was going to say, not only do the state governments tax property and sales, but also the local governments.
That's correct. The parish and the city of Baton Rouge, for
So
instance.
when you add them all up, you could easily be paying 50% of your income in taxes if you're a high-income person.
Absolutely. On top of the income tax that comes out of obviously your income, there's either self-employment tax upon a self-employed person, or if it's an employee, then they pay Social Security, which is basically the same as self-employment tax.
And the purpose of the Social Security or self-employment tax is to fund purportedly retirement and medical expenses when you attain a certain age. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then also, in addition to the income tax, the property taxes, and the sales or transaction, I call them taxes, we have death taxes.
Absolutely.
Explain that.
Well, the death tax, fortunately, Louisiana repealed its inheritance tax, and we've been trying to help some folks in the legislature also get rid of the Louisiana gift tax. We still have it. It is imposed at a maximum tax rate of about 3%, but the Louisiana inheritance tax was repealed several years ago if you handle it properly when somebody passes. The federal estate tax, Locke, is still there. It began within recent times, began with about a $1 million exemption. It's been sort of phased up. Right now we have a $2 million exemption, meaning if one of us passes away, that the first $2 million in our assets or property is exempt from the federal estate tax. If you get above that exemption, it's imposed at a 46% bracket. Okay?
It's almost half.
Yeah, almost half. It used to be a lot worse. It used to be 55%.
Jeez, my man.
It's perceived to be a very unfair tax by me and people like myself, because most people that have accumulated an estate
Already pay taxes.
exactly.
It's double taxation.
Yeah,
Very
or
interesting.
worse. You know.
Yeah, you're right. Because you throw into that mix the fact that if you're operating a business in a certain form, corporation, C, corporation, the corporation itself is also taxed.
Exactly. Yeah, what's called a C corporation is truly double taxation. An S corporation, the income is passed through to the individual shareholders usually and taxed at their tax rate.
Now, let's talk about the process of collection of taxes, how the government does that. Right. How does the government collect taxes?
Well, this is a whole lot of what we do, Locke, in my office. There's a lot going on with the IRS right now. They are expending a lot of money to increase the number of audits, okay, because they believe that that's something that needs to happen. So to increase the number of audits, and secondly, to improve or increase their collection of taxes that they know is owed, and for whatever reason they just haven't been able to collect it.
Now, is that a good thing?
I think it is. I think, long term, over the course of years, it's a very good thing, because if they collect the taxes at the rates that we have now from the people that owe it, then there will be less pressure on the Congress and on the President to increase the rates higher than the 35 and the 6% that we're talking about. Obviously, for somebody that's been cutting corners on their taxes or whatever, it's not a good thing for them.
Now, as I understand our tax system, it is a voluntary system in the sense that everyone is required by law, but voluntarily complies with it, to file an income tax return, and they're trusted to report the accurate amount that they receive. Explain that. Yeah,
it is like what we call a self-assessment system. Self-assessment as contrasted with maybe a system whereby, on April 15th, you and I would go down to the IRS and they would prepare the return for us. Instead, we self-report our income and submit it on a return.
Let's continue this on the next segment, talking about how the IRS collects taxes. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines and David Gunn. We'll be right back.
Television has evolved to the sensational. Cox Digital Cable is high touch with an interactive program guide anyone can use. Cox Digital is tasteful with sophisticated programming choices that stimulate, educate, and make you feel great. Cox Digital is sight and sound extraordinaire, especially on an HD set. Eye-popping clarity and 5.1 surround sound. Cox Digital lets you smell. Well, we're working on it. Experience the digital evolution with Cox Digital Cable, television for the senses.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, pleased to have on the show today David Gunn. He's a board-certified tax attorney, amongst other things. David, again, thanks for being on the show.
Very welcome.
We were talking about how it's a self-reporting system, and that is what you're going to pay to the federal government in taxes. Let's go ahead and explain the process.
Yeah, you file your own tax return. Locke, the government doesn't file it for you. It is a self-assessment system, and that's where a little bit of some of the misconception comes in. We have people come in our office, obviously dealing with IRS audits and investigations frequently, and a fairly typical comment that we have is that, well, the IRS possibly can't prove that. Outside of the criminal arena, the taxpayer, for all intents and purposes, generally has the burden of proof.
And let's explain what that means.
Well, it means that we file our own tax return, and we're in control of almost all evidence that affects our income taxes. Now, the IRS will receive copies of W-2 forms and 1099s and things like that, so they have that. And through their investigation arm, they can generally get a bunch of information, but it's considered by the court system and by the law to be more readily available to the taxpayer. Therefore, we have the burden of proving that something either is not income or that we're allowable for a deduction or whatever.
So, if I report a certain level of income on my tax return and the IRS says, we want to meet with you, we're going to audit you, it is not the IRS's burden of proof to show that my level of income is not right. It's my burden of proof to show the IRS what I reported on that form is accurate. And it's not coming from a mouth, it's coming from documentation.
Well, that's correct. They, to an extent, they will hear what you have to say about something, and if you have credibility and you don't have a history of misleading them, for instance, then your testimony may carry some weight. But generally, you're going to want to have documentary evidence of what your income and your deductions are.
So what is the IRS looking at these days? You talked about them spending a lot more money enforcing and collecting. What is it that they're focused on?
Well, they are increasing the number of audits. They're spending a lot of money collecting the taxes that are on the books. They are also, they perceive, the service perceives that it has a big problem with people maybe not being straight with their income tax returns. So they're sending people to jail. We had a client, unfortunately, that recently was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison for a false tax return. Another area that we have been seeing really for several years over our internet service is that the IRS is very concerned, Locke, that a lot of professionals are not filing their income tax returns.
So just not even filing a tax return?
Correct. And the idea is kind of like they're not really on the radar screen. So the IRS is very concerned about this, and they're spending a lot of money and devoting a lot of resources to finding those people and prosecute them. We recently had a client, an attorney in this area, who didn't file a tax return for a couple of years, and the government would like to see him spend 12 months in jail.
Serious stuff.
Yeah, very serious.
What, as I understand it, there's a dirty dozen dozen issues that they're looking at. Explain that to the folks.
Yeah, this is something that they issue about once a year, Locke. It's called the Dirty Dozen, and it's their list of what they perceive to be abusive activities or things that's going on which tends to hurt the system, meaning the income tax system that we have. Again, it's 12 different things each year. This year, the list included, if you can believe this, these little telephone refunds that we're getting
that you see on TV?
Right. And it runs from about $30 up to about $60, and it's really silly, but apparently some people have been claiming much larger amounts. and there's been some tax preparers who have been allegedly engaged in fraud. That I know of, there were 2 preparers in the Baton Rouge area that were arrested in that area. The other thing is, I guess, other types of preparer fraud. The IRS believes that there are preparers out there that are charging people money to do their tax returns and telling them, for instance, if you claim a certain level of charitable contributions to your church, you won't get audited and you'll, in effect, get away with that. A real serious thing is what we call identity theft on the internet.
All about that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everybody knows what it is, including me.
Right. I really haven't seen it, but what I'm hearing about and reading is that people will receive emails that says, this is an email from the Internal Revenue Service. We believe you're entitled to a refund. Give us your Social Security number and your credit card number, and we'll facilitate you getting this refund. And then what happens is you end up with charges on your credit card.
Now, define a fraudulent return. What is that?
Well, I mean, technically a fraudulent return is where someone has intentionally understated their income or, for instance, intentionally overstated the deductions. And that is very serious. It's a criminal act. It can involve the person being incarcerated. And also, a lot of people are not aware, but if you have done that and the IRS can prove it, then on top of the taxes and the normal penalties and interest that you owe, that's right, there's in addition a 75% fraud penalty. So if your tax is $10,000, on top of the other penalty and interest, there would be a $7,500 fraud penalty that would be imposed.
So easily double.
Yes.
When it's all said
very
and
easily.
done.
More than double. That's correct.
So let's talk about what someone does if they get a letter from the IRS and it says, we need to talk to you.
Right.
Take them through the process.
Well, obviously you need to pay attention to it. Unbelievably,
Don't ignore it.
yeah, we hear people that they just don't respond to it, and that's not what you want to do. You want to obviously contact the IRS examiner if it's a complicated return, or if you have a CPA, for instance, that's been preparing your return, you should call them and have them make the appointment for you and maybe even go for you. You know, for people that are being what we call being straight on their tax returns, Locke, it's really nothing to worry about. It should be an easy process. For people that have been cutting corners, then it can be very traumatic for them to receive that notice.
And as I understand it, they can be either looking at one issue or they can be looking at the whole return.
That's correct.
And so it can be a very quick process and resolved quickly, or it could be months or years, frankly.
Right. The system is set up so that it would move forward quickly. You know, people sometimes complain and say, well, you know, this has taken 3 or 4 months, and then you talk to them, and sometimes it's the agent just being very busy with the IRS, and sometimes it's people, the IRS officer will say, Locke, why don't you get this list of documents together, and then it takes you a month or 6 weeks to get it, and there's a delay.
And I know in your experience you found the folks that you deal with to be very sophisticated. They know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing, the IRS folks.
Yeah, the IRS people, especially in Baton Rouge, are very competent, and they really know what they're doing, so the process should go very smoothly.
All right, let's talk about the next leg of this, and that's estate planning on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, and David Gunn. We'll be right back.
Cox Communications is homegrown with local programming for you. Whether it's local sports, local arts and education, local news and weather, local faith and worship, or local stations with the best in entertainment, Cox Communications brings it all home to you. It's homegrown programming with roots, only on cable, only on Cox.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, pleased to have on the show today David Gunn. He's a certified tax attorney here in Baton Rouge. David, again, thanks. We were talking about the process if you're audited, and basically you go meet with the examiner, and let's say they say, look, we think you owe more taxes. What are the options that the person has?
Well, first of all, Locke, there's 2 or 3 different ways that an audit happens. One is just a correspondence audit. You get a letter and you communicate with them by mail. The other type is to meet with them, resolve it. If you're unhappy with the amount of tax that they believe that you owe, then you might try to meet with them and their group manager and say, look, I think you should reconsider this, or take a look at additional evidence. After that process is concluded, they send you a 30-day letter and say, this is like a bill. Here's what we think you owe. At that point, you have what's called appeal rights, and you can go administratively within the IRS to the appeals division and ask an officer that's had nothing to do with this audit to take a fresh look at it. And a lot of people have real good luck with that. And they'll look at it and adjust it, possibly in your favor. If you're still not happy with that, then there's the court system. And the two options there, Locke, you can go to, once you get what's called the 90-day letter, which is a formal certified letter, then you've got 90 days to file a petition with the tax court to have them redetermine how much you owe without paying the tax. The other option is to pay the tax and then to go to court in Baton Rouge, in federal district court, looking for a refund of that tax.
Now, why would you choose one over the other?
Well, most people go to tax court because they don't want to pay the tax. The tax court is out of Washington, D.C. They kind of ride a circuit, so you can have your case heard usually in New Orleans. Since the hurricanes, they've actually been having tax court matters up here in Baton Rouge. So if you don't want to pay the tax, you go to tax court. If you'd rather just have it heard by one of the federal district judges here in Baton Rouge, or for whatever reason,
I guess.
yeah, for you to go ahead and pay the tax, and then if you get your money back, then they would pay you a little bit of interest.
I understand. Let's shift gears then, because as we mentioned in the first segment, taxes are also paid not only on your income and the other areas we've talked about, but also on your death. So estate planning is an important part of preparing and managing your estate. As I understand it, there's really two components. It's kind of